غرباء 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 غرباء.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi, amma ba'du. In regards to the mas'ala of music as well as singing, it is an issue that the ulama of al-Islam, you will find that there are different opinions in this regard. Major scholars of al-Islam in the past have been understood to see the permissibility of music as well as singing. And two things happened in the case of those people who said that music was permissible. One case is that they would say that it was permissible based upon weak proofs, hadith that are not authentic. And the other issue is that some people will say that it was permissible based upon proofs that are authentic, but they're taken out of context. They have been taken out of context and misunderstood, and we'll try to, inshallah, put them in their proper context as the other scholars did concerning the issue of al-ikhtilaf. What happens now is that people have the need to follow their desires in regards to this particular mas'ala. Many times they take the position of those scholars who it is said that they felt that music was permissible. But if you were to look at their comments and at their statements very closely, you will find what they were saying was permissible is the type of singing that is permissible in the deen. It's permissible in the deen. But the real challenge is the challenge of the people who use music as an opportunity to get close to Allah Azza wa Jal. Like the people of Tasawwuf, Sufis, they use music and dancing as a way to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some of the jama'at as well, during the times that we're living right now, they want to attract and they want to draw the attention of the young people, for an example. So they say that music is permissible in order to get people to be from their supporters. And they'll use what this scholar said or what that scholar said. From the contemporary scholars, and he is a scholar, is the Sheikh Yusuf al-Qardawi, Ghafarallahu lana wa lahu. In his famous book, The Halal and the Haraam, he tried to show how music was halal, and he used the position of Al-Imam al-Ghazali, Al-Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah. But in reality, Al-Imam al-Ghazali, if you were to look closely at what he was saying, he wasn't saying that music that the majority of the scholars have said is haram. He didn't say that that type of music is haram, is permissible. That's not the case. So what we want to do here today, inshallah, is shed light on the proofs of those people who are of the opinion that the music is haram because they have the dalil with them. As for the other side, as I mentioned, either the text that they're using, the proof that they're using, it is authentic, but it's in this wrong place, or it's not authentic at all. An example of that is in the story of the Nabi of Allah, Ayyub, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi wa ala nabiyyina. When Allah Ta'ala tried Ayyub, and for a number of years, he was sick with leprosy. When the time came where Allah Azza wa Jal wanted, or he decreed that he would be cured of his sickness, Allah Ta'ala commanded him, Arkud bi rijlika. Take your foot, Ayyub, and hit the ground right here. And there's going to gush forth a spring that is cool for you, and bi'idhnillah is going to heal your skin problem. So because Allah Azza wa Jal commanded him to hit the ground with his foot, some people say this is a dalil where it's permissible to dance in the religion. Allah told Ayyub to hit his foot on the ground, and from that they expand the understanding of that ayat, and they say it's permissible now to dance because of this issue. And that's clearly an ayat taken out of context. Another example of the people who say that music is permissible an authentic dalil because it's from the Qur'an, but again, it's not in its proper context. And that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Qur'an, وَآتَيْنَا دَاوُودَ زُبُورًا. We have given Dawood the Zabur, the Psalms. So some of the people in Al-Islam are of the opinion that the Nabi of Al-Islam, Dawood, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi wa ala nabiyyina, he used to sing the praises of Allah. And he used to sing the praises of Allah with a harp. He used to play the harp. That concept of Dawood singing the praises of Allah, the Zabur that came to him, he's playing a harp and the birds and the animals used to come and listen to him. That is a concept that's in the Bible of the Christians and the Torah of the Jews. That's not in the book of Allah. What the Bible and the Torah would suggest is that Dawood himself came up with the words in which he praised Allah, and they called those words his Psalms. There's a book in the Bible called the Book of Psalms. But in the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, we understand that the Zabur that Dawood was given was an actual book that was revealed to him from Allah, like the Qur'an was revealed on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allah Ta'ala revealed to him the book, which is called the Zabur, and it had nothing to do with playing a harp. But he used to have the ability that when he read, it was a beautiful recitation. One of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he also used to read the Qur'an in a beautiful way. And the Nabi told that man when he heard the recitation of his companion, "Innaka utitu min mazamir ali Dawood." You have been given a voice similar to the flute, the melody of the way Dawood used to read the Zabur. It had nothing to do with music at all. So the people who say that music is permissible, they have no dalil. There's no dalil that makes it clear, this issue, that music is permissible. Either dalil, if it's clear, we're saying music is permissible, the dalil is da'if. And if it is authentic, then you'll find that the dalil is being misunderstood, misappropriated, used out of context. As for those people who have the other position that music is not permissible and it's a kabira from the kaba'ir, they have all of the dalil. Dalils from the Qur'an and dalil from the Sunnah. As for the dalil from the Qur'an, you have to pay attention. All of the dalil that show that music is haram from the Qur'an, that the ulama of Islam used in the past, all of them, they are not definitive. They are not proofs that you can't argue, you can't understand it another way. They suggest that it could be music, but no one can come and definitively state this ayat is to talking about and pertaining to music, and if you don't accept it as music, then you're astray and you're rejecting and misunderstanding the book of Allah. It has multiple meanings, but one of those multiple meanings is the meaning of music. So they have those dalils from the Quran, 5, 6 of them, and from the Sunnah, that's where the strong dalils are to show the impermissibility of listening to music, playing music, selling music, having music on your telephone. All of those issues are not permissible, especially with what comes to us from the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we don't make a distinction between the Quran or the Sunnah when it comes to the ability of those two sources to make things halal or haram. So from those ayat, and they are quite a few, 5, 6, is the statement of Allah Ta'ala in Soorat Al-Isra, ayat number 64. Allah Ta'ala mentioned when he created Iblis, he created Adam, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi wa ala nabiyyina, and he commanded Iblis and the malaika to bow down to Adam. They all bowed down except Iblis. He said, am I going to bow down to someone who you created him out of clay? This one who you have honored over me, Adam, I'm going to mislead him. If you give me time until Yawm al-Qiyamah, I'm going to mislead him, and I'm going to mislead his progeny, his children. The ayat went on to say, well, Allah Ta'ala mentioned to Iblis, he said, go ahead. Any of them who follows you, then verily the hellfire is going to be your reward, and it's going to be a grievous reward. And then ayat number 64, and this is the proof. Allah Ta'ala mentioned to Iblis, wastafziz. Make that statement of trying to seduce them. Wastafziz man istata'ta minhum bi sawtika wa ajlib alayhim bi khaylika wa rajlika wa sharikhum fil amwali wal awlad wa idhum wa ma ya'iduhum ash-shaytanu illa ghurura. Allah Ta'ala said in this ayah that's used to show music is haram, He said, seduce them and trick them with your alluring voice, the voice of fitna. Go ahead and send them astray. Try to send them astray with that voice. And also attack them with your cavalry, attack them with your army, with your host. Because anyone from amongst them who goes with you, they're going to be punished. And Shaytaan, he doesn't promise them anything except that his promise to them is ghurur. Go ahead and be with them and take portion with their children and their money and promise them whatever you want. And Shaytaan doesn't promise them anything except lies and deceit. This ayat of the Qur'an was understood by some of the scholars of al-Islam, where Allah Ta'ala told Iblis this word, attract them with your voice. From those scholars was the Tabi'i Mujaahid, rahimahullah ta'ala. In our class on Sunday, we're given the tafsir of the Qur'an. We're dealing with the tafsir of the Qur'an. We just started last Sunday, the first class. And we talked about those scholars from the companions who were prolific at the science of a tafsir. And one of them was Abdullah ibn Abbaas. And from the students of Abdullah ibn Abbaas, radiyallahu anhuma wa ardahuma, was this Tabi'i Mujaahid. And we had mentioned that Mujaahid said about himself that he went over the Qur'an with Abdullah ibn Abbaas 14 times. He asked him about each and every ayat 14 times, every ayat in the Qur'an. So it is assumed and it is understood, and Allah knows best, that Abdullah ibn Abbaas was the one who informed him. But we can't definitively state that. That's what's assumed, that his teacher taught him that. But that may not be necessarily the case. Mujaahid himself, when he said the meaning of the voice of Shaytaan here is talking about music, is an indication, and it is a classic case where a scholar of al-Islam took this ayat to mean music. So that's the first dalil that the ulama of al-Islam, they use to show the impermissibility of music, that a Shaytan's voice here is the voice of musical instruments. And we have to give some credence to that point of view because it is well known the effect and the impact that music has upon people in terms of committing crimes and other than that, in terms of not praying, in terms of developing ideas that are not consistent with the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, I have to, in being fair and in being just, no one can come and say, if you don't believe that the voice of a Shaytan in this ayat is music, then you're astray. No. This is not an ayat that definitively means that the voice of Shaytan is music. Some of the ulama of al-Islam said that the voice of Shaytan in this particular ayat is referring to any and every kalam that comes to you that encourages you to disobey Allah. So if a person has a friend, a person has a companion, a person has a mate, if a person has an individual who is encouraging them to do the wrong thing, then that is from the voice of Shaytan just as much as it can possibly be the music, all of those. The point is that's the first dalil. From the other proofs that the ulama of al-Islam they use is in Soorat Luqmaan, ayat number 6. And this is one of the famous dalils that the companion Abdullah ibn Abbaas used, and the companion Abdullah ibn Mas'ud used, radiyallahu anhuma. And they just didn't use this dalil, but they used to swear by Allah. And we know that the companions, radiyallahu anhum ajma'een, they would not swear by Allah about things that they thought were small or frivolous, or the things that they were not sure about. So they used to swear by Allah that it was talking about singing. Allah Ta'ala mentioned in this particular ayah, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْتَرِي لَهْوَ الْحَدِيثِ لِيَضُلُّ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَيَتَّخِذُهَا هُزُوًا. Verily, from the people are those individuals who they purchase vain speech in order to make the people go astray from the way of Allah, and so that they can take that vain speech or the way of Allah as fun and jest. أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. Those people will get a punishment that is a severe punishment. وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُنَا وَلَّى مُسْتَكْبِرًا كَأَن لَّمْ يَسْمَعْهَا كَأَنَّ فِي أُذُنَيْهِ وَقْرًا فَبَشِّرْهُمْ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. If the ayat, the Qur'an, is read to those individuals, they turn away in arrogance. And they act as if they didn't hear those ayat of the Qur'an, and they act as if they have plugs in their ear. So give them glad tidings of a grievous punishment. Ibn Abbaas radiallahu anhu, he said that the lahwul hadith, the vain speech in this ayat, he said, wallahi, is talking about ghina. It's talking about the fact that people sing and they waste their time singing. Abdullah ibn Abbaas radiallahu anhu would not swear about something like that. And we know who Abdullah ibn Abbaas is in al-Islam, especially in regards to the tafsir of the Qur'an. And other than him, as I mentioned, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, other than them from the Tabi'in, Qatada, other than him from the Tabi'in, Al-Qama, rahimahumullahu subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the things that makes this ayat, ikhwani, very strong is the statement of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam that supports this ayat, showing that music means singing, that idle speech, lahwul hadith, means singing, is the authentic hadith. The Prophet told this community sallallahu alaihi wa ala alihi wasallam, لا تبيعوا القينات ولا تشتروهن ولا خير في تجارة فيهن أنزلت هذه الآية ومن الناس من يشتري لهو الحديث ليضل عن سبيل الله بغير علم. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in that authentic hadith, do not sell the slave girls who sing songs. In the past, the Muslims used to have slave girls. You can go to the marketplace, and in that marketplace, you can buy and sell slaves. The Prophet told the people sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this hadith, لا تبيعوا القينات, don't sell the slave girls. ولا تشتروهن, and don't purchase the slave girls. And in another narration is the addition, وَلَا تُعَلِّمُهُنَّ, and don't teach them music. Don't teach them music. Because any tijara, any transaction dealing with the women who sing these songs or the boys and the men who sing these songs, there's no good in it. Because of this, Allah has revealed, He says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then He read this ayah, from the people of those individuals who purchase vain speech in order to send the people astray from the way of Allah without any knowledge. And they make an attempt to play games with the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's a pretty strong dalil in that it has a hadith of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam explaining it. And the reason why he mentioned the slave girls here, so that no one could come and say, what about the slave men? Music is permissible because he only said the slave girls. What about the man who sings the song? The reason why he mentioned the slave girls, and Allahu alam, is, as the ulama say, kharaja makhraj al-ghalib. That was what was prevalent during the time. More slave girls than there were women. And you're going to see, inshallah, the position of Al-Imam Malik in this regard when we talk about the positions of the four imams of al-Islam, Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, Al-Imam Malik, Al-Imam Shafi, Al-Imam Ahmed, who all of them were in agreement that music was not permissible. And singing from the slave girl was not permissible from what was present during their time. In addition to that, ikhwani, the third dalil from the Qur'an. So far we've dealt with two ayahs and one hadith. This is the third ayah from the Qur'an. The people who say that music is haram, they have dalil. The people who say that music is permissible, they don't have any dalil. Either the dalil is da'if, it's not authentic, or it's being misunderstood or taken out of context. The third dalil is in Soorat Al-Furqan, when Allah Ta'ala described His servants, وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنَ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. He went through a series of ayat describing His servants with good descriptions, what they do and what they don't do. One of the ayahs, Allah Ta'ala described the believers concerning it. وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَشْهَدُونَ الزُّورِ وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا. The believers, Ibadur Rahman, they are those people who they do not bear witness to azur. Azur in the Arabic language, it means falsehood. They do not bear witness to falsehood. And if they pass by vain speech, they pass by it in an honorable way. They don't sit to listen to vain speech, whether vain speech happens to be music, namima, ghiba, lying, or other than that. So the ulama of Islam use this ayat to prove the impermissibility of music, because music in most instances is vain speech. In all instances is vain speech. Now again, I repeat, no one can come and say, if you don't see al-laghu, vain speech, as being music, if you don't see it that way and understand it that way, then you're astray. Because you can't state definitively that vain speech is only music here. Vain speech, as I just mentioned, it can be the person who is lying. It's the person who is making namima. It's the person who's doing ghiba. All of that is vain speech, and music comes under that umbrella. So again, we go back to the ulama of al-Islam, like al-Imam Mujaahid. Al-Imam al-Mujaahid, he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, about vain speech, he said that this ayat is talking about the Ibadur Rahman, Allah's servants, alladhina la yastami'una ila al-ghina. They do not listen to music. And from the people who had that understanding that this ayah shows the impermissibility of music was Ali ibn Abi Talib's son, Muhammad al-Hanafiya. And from the people who took this position was Al-Imam al-Hasan al-Basri. So those are some of the great ulama of al-Islam, again, who took this position. And when we find that the Salaf have a position that could be understood and comprehended that way, we at least make istitnas with it when we say we respect that position. It makes sense, but we can't definitively state this ayat was revealed saying it's meaning music here. But that's one of the understandings of the ulama. The fourth ayat, ikhwani, is in Soorat An-Najm, the surah of the star, An-Najm, ayat number 61. Allah Ta'ala mentioned in this ayat, أَفَمِنْ هَذَا الْحَدِيثِ تَعْجَبُونَ وَتَضْحَكُونَ وَلَا تَبْكُونَ وَأَنْتُمْ سَامِدُونَ. He said to those kuffar of Quraysh concerning the Qur'an, do you people find this Qur'an ajib? Do you find it ajib? Ajib meaning in a negative way. You don't want to listen to it. You don't want to believe it. You don't want to respect it. Do you look at the Qur'an like that and you're laughing and playing around and not crying? وَأَنْتُمْ سَامِدُونَ. وَأَنْتُمْ سَامِدُونَ has multiple interpretations. The scholar of the companions, the one who the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam took him when he was a young man, put him and surrounded him in his cloak, and made a prophetic dua, Allahumma faqihhu fi din wa allimhu ta'wil. Oh Allah, teach this boy the religion, give him comprehension, make him a faqih from the fuqaha, and give him the understanding of the Qur'an. As a result of that, he was the single most knowledgeable companion of the Qur'an. The single most knowledgeable companion of the tafsir of the Qur'an, Abdullah ibn Abbaas, as al-Imam al-Suyuti mentioned in his book, Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran. Abdullah ibn Abbaas, may Allah be pleased with him and his family and the rest of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the interpretation and the meaning, wa antum samidun, you people are listening to this Quran, finding it ajib, and you're laughing and playing around and you're not crying, and you are wasting time and being idle. He says samidun means you are listening to amusement, you're listening to singing, you're listening to those things that are distracting you. And what's distracting you is music, because in the language of some of the Arabs of that time, the word samada, where this verb is the verb where this word comes from, it means the person who is singing, the person who is engaged in singing and that type of issue. So Abdullah ibn Abbas, based upon that, radiyallahu anhu, he said that this ayat is a dalil that singing is not permissible. Again, just like the previous ayat, the principle or the qa'idah is, ikhwani, every single ayat in the Qur'an that the ulama of Islam use to show music is not permissible, they are not definitive. They are not the ilm al-qat'i, that clear proof that is leaving no room for another interpretation. And this ayat is the same way, but it goes to show again the understanding of one of the companions, Abdullah ibn Abbaas radiyallahu anhu. The fifth and final dalil that we're going to use is the statement of Allah Ta'ala in Soorat Al-Anfal, ayat number 35, in which he described the condition of the kuffar of Quraysh. And he said about them, مَا كَانَ صَلَاتُهُمْ عِنْدَ الْبَيْتِ إِلَّا مُكَاءٍ وَتَصْدِيًا. The prayer, the salat of the kuffar of Quraysh, they used to pray at the Kaaba. Allah said that their salat at the Kaaba is nothing other than whistling and clapping their hands. That's all their salat is. They're not really worshiping Allah with tawheed, nor are they making the salat that Allah Ta'ala has legislated. So even if they did have sincerity when they were at the Kaaba doing what they were doing, their salat was not accepted because they didn't fulfill the condition of it being what Allah Azza wa Jalla has legislated, not to mention the fact that they were making shirk with Allah. So the point that the ulama use this ayah for is to say, if whistling and clapping hands is a reason that Allah criticized Quraysh, that they were whistling and clapping hands, then using musical instruments, it makes more clamor and more noise and more iz'aj than clapping hands and whistling. So if that's haram, then clearly music and singing is haram as well. Again, this dalil that's being used, it is not a dalil that is qat'i. No doubt, you can't argue with it, because it could be argued that this is being an indication showing that those people were just wasting time because they were not necessarily clapping their hands or whistling. But it is authentic with some of the poetry of the Arabs describing the ibadah of Quraysh at that time, is that they literally used to whistle and they literally used to clap their hands. So those are the ayat that are used. The 5 ayat of the ulama of Islam that they do have, the least that we can make is isti'nas. Okay, the ayahs are not definitive, we accept that. But we have these powerful mountains of knowledge who understood and comprehended that these ayat, they meant music, the insight, the knowledge that Allah gave them. They came up with that interpretation based upon their ijtihad. Now we move into the dalil from the sunnah, and in the sunnah is where you find the strong dalil, in the sunnah. And again, I emphasize, Ahl sunnah, Ahl hadith, people of as-salafiyah, we don't make any distinction between the thing is established by the Qur'an only or is established by the Sunnah only. Either one of those two sources, if the thing is established, is our deen. So there are a number of issues that are established only by the Qur'an, and there are some issues that are established only by the Sunnah, and there are issues that we accept and we embrace. As for the Sunnah, Khwani, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, his kunya is either Abu Malik or Abu Amir al-Ash'ari. They're not sure which one is his kunya, but the hadith is in Sahih al-Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ said, and he prophesies, لَيَكُنَّنَّ مِنْ أُمَّتِي أَقْوَامٌ يَسْتَحِلُّونَ الْحِرْ وَالْحَرِيرِ وَالْخَمْرِ وَالْمَعَازِفِ. They are going to come, a group of my ummah, some people from my ummah who are going to come in the future, and they're going to try to make halal a few issues that are haram. They're going to try to make halal zina. Al-hir means zina. And sadaqa Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are those people who believe that you can do mut'a marriage today. You can do a marriage in which you temporarily make an agreement with the girl, and then after that you get out of the marriage. The Prophet told the truth. There's another marriage where young people are in the university, between themselves they get married without letting other people know. And this is famous in a number of the Arab countries. We don't have to necessarily mention the Arab countries, but it's common The man is going to get married to the girl between him and her. That's it. No witnesses, no wali, sometimes not even any dowry. So they make haram was halal. They also will try to make silk for men haram, and we see that. And thirdly, they try to make khamr haram or halal, like marijuana, other than marijuana. Those people who say that weed is a natural herb from the ground and therefore you can smoke it. You can use weed from the ground because there's nothing mentioned about marijuana in the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Even khamr itself, there are some people who are of the opinion that as long as you don't get drunk, you can drink it. You can drink it. As for those scholars of al-Islam who said that the drinking of nabidh, which was a type of intoxicant that they used to drink, especially in Kufa, as a result of that, some of the major scholars of al-Islam, scholars who some of the people put over the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everybody makes mistakes, and people say things that everybody say things where they make mistakes where you say, how could he have made a mistake in such a thing? How could he say khamr was halal? He made ijtihad and he made a mistake. And inshallah, he's going to get his reward with Allah. From the people who took that position, Al-Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, Zamir al-Mu'mineen in hadith, had his own madhab. And in some instances, you can even say he was more knowledgeable than some of the well-known four madhab imams that we have. From the people who took that position, Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahumullah ta'ala, they made ijtihad and they made a mistake. They were not saying khamr was halal, trying to make haram halal. They made ijtihad. Ala kullin, this hadith of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned lastly that they were trying to make musical instruments halal. So you understand, or what is called the mafhum al-makhalif. If they're going to try to make the musical instruments halal, that means the ruling of the instrument must be haram. And the product that comes from those instruments is the music itself. So if the instrument is haram, what the instrument produces is haram due to the principle ma buniya al-batil fahuwa batil. Whatever is built upon and predicated upon falsehood, what comes as a result of that thing has to be false as well. If we didn't have anything but this dalil by itself, lakafa, it's enough. No ayah, no other hadith. It's enough. It's in Sahih al-Bukhari, and the way Imam al-Bukhari brought this in his book, Sahih al-Bukhari, some of the people of knowledge, they said that it was a weak hadith, but in reality it is an authentic hadith. Number 2 from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wasallam is the hadith that was collected by Imam Ahmed on the authority of Abdullah ibn Abbaas radiyallahu anhu, which helps us to understand. He's mentioned in this hadith, Abdullah ibn Abbaas. So this hadith makes musical instruments haram. So we can understand now why his interpretation of those ayat is that music is haram, because he's the narrator of this particular hadith. The Sunnah explains the Qur'an. The Prophet said in this authentic hadith, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Inna Allah ta'ala harrama ala ummati al-khamr wal-maysir wal-kuba wa kullu muskirin haram. He said, verily Allah the Most High, He has made haram upon my ummah khamr, and He has made haram upon my ummah gambling, and He has made haram upon my ummah al-kuba, and He has made haram everything that gets you drunk is an intoxicant. When the people from the students of Abdullah ibn Abbas heard this hadith, they say, Ya Abdullah ibn Abbas, what's the meaning of this word that the Prophet mentioned, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, al-kuba? What does that word mean? Abdullah ibn Abbas said a tabl. This word al-kuba, it means the drum. In another variation of this hadith, authentic variation, he included in it the flute. That Allah Ta'ala has made the drum haram, and He has made the flute haram. Abdullah ibn Abbas by himself, in another authentic statement, by himself, the words of Ibn Abbas, he said, the drum is haram. The drum is haram, because he knows that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa ala alihi wa sallam, he made the tahreem of the drum. So this hadith establishes for us that these two musical instruments are haram. The drum as well as the flute, from the lisan of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. The third hadith, ikhwani, is the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam, inni la anhaakum an al-buka ولكني نهيتكم عن صوتين أحمقين فاجرين صوت عند النعمة لهو ولعب ومزامير الشيطان وصوت عند مصيبة. He said in this authentic hadith sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I do not make haram for you people and prohibit you people from crying. If someone dies, if you're sad and something happens, crying is not haram in this religion. The concept and the statement, be a man, don't cry, that's not from our deen. Men cry. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to cry, and his companions used to cry, radiyallahu anhum. So he told the people, it's not haram for you to cry when someone dies. He said, but what I prohibit you people from is, I prohibit you from the two voices that are imbecilic. They're the voices of the imbecile. They make you stupid. The voice itself is not the voice of intelligence. And they're the two voices of al-fujur. These two voices are the two voices of evil. He went on to explain what are those two voices that he said, I make haram upon you. The first one is the voice that people make when they're happy, a ni'mah is given to them, so they celebrate by using the voice, the music that is accompanied by wind instruments, which are the instruments of a shaytan. That's haram. That's what I make haram for you. And the second voice is when something happens to somebody, they have a musibah, then they start to scream, they start to wail, and they start to say those things that they shouldn't say when something happens. When the Prophet's son Ibrahim died, radiyallahu anhu, wa salawatullahi wa salam ala nabiyyina, he said, Ibrahim, we love you, Ibrahim, and we're going to be sad that you're going to go. You died. We're sad about that. وَلَكِنَّا لَا نَقُولُ إِلَّا مَا يُرْضَى رَبِّنَا مَا يُرْضَى رَبَّنَا. We're sad that you died, Ibrahim, you left, but we're not going to say anything except that which pleases our Lord. So when something happens of the musibah, we shouldn't curse the time, we shouldn't curse Allah, we shouldn't say, woe is me, we shouldn't be of the people who are saying those things that are against the deen. This is another one of the clear hadith that go to show, because he mentioned mazamir al-shaytan, the wind instruments of a shaytan, flutes and the like. The Prophet made it impermissible, sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. The fourth dalil from the hadith, actually it's the fifth one because we mentioned one hadith that explained the ayah. The fourth dalil is the hadith of Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu that's been collected by Imam al-Bazzar in his Musnad. The Prophet says sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Sotan mal'unan. There are two voices that are cursed. Sawtun mazamirin inda ni'mah wa sawtu waylin inda musibah. The two voices that are cursed by Allah is the wind instruments that people play when they want to enjoy themselves, something happened, they want to have a party and celebrate. And the second voice, similar to the previous ayat or the hadith, is the voice that the person makes when some catastrophe befalls them. Those are some of the adillah from the sunnah, and there are more than that from the sunnah, but we have some other issues we want to deal with. As for the companions radiyallahu anhum, Abdullah ibn Umar, whose name has not been mentioned yet. Abdullah ibn Umar was traveling with one of his students, and he came upon a girl who was singing. Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu put his fingers in his ears, and he continued to travel with his student Nafi'. He said, is she still singing? Can you still hear it? He said, yeah, I can still hear it. As long as he was shaking his head that the girl was still singing, Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu didn't take his fingers out of his ears until the student who was with him told him, okay, it's not being heard anymore. Some of the ulama of Islam say that's not a dalil that singing is not permissible. Maybe Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu just didn't want to hear the idle talk of that little girl. But you can't use that as a definitive proof to say that music is haram. And I agree. The dalil by themselves, from the hadith especially, they are more than enough. The great scholar in Islam, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his book Majmu' al-Fatawa, he said that all of the four imams, al-Imam Abu Hanifa, Malik ibn Anas, al-Shafi'i, and Ahmed, rahmatullahi alayhim, rahmatan wasi'ah, that they were united and they had the ittifaq, the total agreement between themselves and their positions that music is not permissible in the deen of Allah Azza wa Jalla. That doesn't mean that there's ijma' or consensus. It doesn't mean that, because some of the ulama took the other opinion. From them, the great scholar of Spain, Al-Imam Ibn Hazm, rahimahullahu subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we're going to come to him, inshallah. From those imams in chronological order, Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, he, along with his madhab, his students who came after him, he was the most strictest of the four madhahib in this regard. This is how we are. We follow the madhab and we follow it according to our desires. When the madhab says something that we don't like, we don't accept it. Only when we don't like it. But when it comes to other issues, we have an asabiyya for the madhab. Whatever the issue is, if it's what the person doesn't like, then he won't follow the madhab. But if it's not against his desires, then he insists that you must follow a madhab. His madhab contains everything. And Imam Abu Hanifa was of the opinion that if you take two sticks and you hit the two sticks together, you're making music and it's not permissible in the deen, and it's a kabira from the kaba'ir. He was the harshest and the strictest in this regard, and his students after him. And Imam Malik also was strict in this regard. And Imam Malik, he said, no one sings songs from the people of Medina and plays musical instruments except that we see them as being the sinful ones. He said in another authentic and famous statement of his that if you were to purchase the slave girl and you found out that she was a singer, since she's a product, she's a commodity in the deen, you go and you buy a car, you find that something is wrong with the engine or the wheel, you can take that car back and get your money back, or cause the one who sold it to you to fix it, because he gave you a product, a commodity that had a defect. Al-Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala was of the opinion, during that time, if a man purchased a slave girl and then he came to find out that she was a singer, he has the right to bring her back to the marketplace and get his money back, or to trade her with someone who is not of this particular description. So Imam Malik, and what's been recorded about him in his madhab and his statements, is clearly against singing as well as the usage of musical instruments. Al-Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, his students defended him vigorously because it has been attributed that Al-Imam al-Shafi'i used to listen to music, and he used to listen to the music of the little boys who used to look very handsome. Some Muslims during that time used to have this fitna. Al-Imam Malik used to warn people, don't be seen with these little boys like this during that time. The little boy who was handsome, he saw one of his students with one of these boys. He said, who is that? He said, that's one of my relatives' children. He said, don't walk with that boy. I'm afraid if the people see you with that boy, they're going to think the wrong thing. And it was his relative. So it's been attributed to Al-Imam al-Shafi'i that he used to listen to the singing of these little boys, wa hasha lillah. So his students defended him vigorously. The great scholar of the Shafi'i madhab, Ibn al-Hajar al-Haythami, he said, and some of the statements attributed to Al-Imam al-Shafi'i said that the one who listens to music and he listens to these people who are singing like that, they are nothing but incompetent individuals, incompetent fools. So the reality of the madhab of al-Imam al-Shafi is clear. Lastly, from the four imams, Ikhwani, is al-Imam Ahmed, the Imam of Ahl-Sunnah, and all of those imams were imams of Ahl-Sunnah. Al-Imam Ahmed, there's a little bit of problem here. Because you do have statements of Al-Imam Ahmed that could be understood and suggest that you can listen to songs and music. You can listen to it. The great Hanbali scholar, Al-Imam Abu Faraj Ibn al-Jawzi al-Hanbali, he has a book called Talbis Iblis, the deception of Iblis. Our brother Bilal Phillips, for his master's degree, I believe it was his master's degree, he only took a portion of that book. Talbis Iblis is a book that Ibn al-Jawzi wrote showing how Iblis deceives people, how he deceived the Shiite, how he deceived the people of a Tasawwuf, how he deceives even ulama, how he deceives the people who are teaching people the Qur'an. He wants to teach the person the Qur'an, and the person is ajami, like we're ajam. We don't speak Arabic. Some of us have problems pronouncing the dhalin. We don't pronounce it correctly. Arabs know how to pronounce that particular harf. So the person who's going to teach you how to memorize the Quran and read the Quran, he's going to spend with you 2 months just going over this letter. You say zalim. He keeps saying, don't say zalim. And he's sitting with you for 3 months on this harf and you're not learning anything else. This scholar wrote in this book, this is a deception of Shaytaan on this particular muallim, this ustad of the Quran. He could see his tongue doesn't work. So just let it go and let him do the best that he can in this regard. So anyway, in his book, Talbis Iblis, there is this issue of music in that book, the issue of music. And there were a group of people who were from the people of a Tasawwuf, especially during that time of Imam Ahmed. They started singing songs like the anashid of today. Songs to make your spirit lifted. Songs to teach you the deen. Songs to take away anxiety and depression. When you hear these songs, the voice, the melody, what's being said, it will give you nashat. So they used to ask Al-Imam Ahmed about these things. He used to say, I don't like it, and it's not sure. Inni akrahuhu. He would say makruh. You don't know which makruh is he saying. Some of the ulama from their madhab and other than their madhab says, when Al-Imam Ahmed says makruh, like the people of the past, he means haram. Other people said no, he means that he doesn't like it. But it appears, Ikhwani, and Allah knows best, he used to tell the people in certain narrations that he despises this type of singing. That's in regards to the four imams. Now we come to some of those scholars who it is said that they used to give the permission to listen to singing and music. And they're great scholars in Islam. Like the Salafi scholar Al-Imam Abu Bakr al-Khalal. He wrote a book in Aqidah and the Minhaj al-Salafi called Kitab al-Sunnah. It's one of the classic and main books. This man was a man of the Sunnah. Al-Khalal. Abu Bakr al-Khalal. They said that he said music is permissible. Al-Ghazali, they said that he said music is permissible. The great Maliki scholar who gave the tafsir of the Quran, the ahkam of the tafsir of the Quran, Ibn al-Arabi. Ibn al-Arabi. Not Ibn Arabi. And we have to make that distinction. If you hear the name Ibn Arabi without Al, Ibn Arabi is a kafir because of what he used to believe. So the ulama made takfir of him because of what he used to believe. His tasawwuf took him outside of the realm of al-Islam. He believed in al-hulul, that you become one with Allah and Allah is one with you, and he used to say some crazy things that the ulama threw him out of Islam as a result of that. But there's a good scholar of the Sunnah, Ibn al-Arabi from the Maliki madhab. These three scholars, in actuality, Ikhwani, they said what's permissible is that permissibility, is that issue of the singing, like we were just mentioning a few minutes ago. The singing that the people used to make at that time that elevates a person's spirit. When you look hard, Yusuf al-Qardawi in his book, the Halal and Haraam, if you go back and you read what he says and he makes the dalil and shows you the dalil of what he perceives al-Ghazali is saying, you can clearly see, in that book is translated into English, that Ghazali was clearly talking about that which the scholars didn't have ikhtilaf about. The singing that the girls do at a wedding, the singing that the girls do on the day of the Eid, the singing that people may do as part of their culture, even the men. They have a particular dance or song and they say things. His kalam was about those issues. It wasn't about open-ended music, Kulthum, other than Kulthum, rahimahallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala. But one scholar who did say it was permissible to listen to music was the great scholar in Islam, Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi. And again, as I mentioned before, when we find that this brother says that music is halal, and he says it and he's not embarrassed to say it, he really believes that, this sheikh, that student of knowledge, and he's not following his desires, before you go overboard and you do overkill and you pass a judgment on that individual who's doing his best to do ijtihad, you have to know that people better than him, bigger than him, preceded him to that position. Doesn't make it halal, but whatever ruling you give to him, simply because he took that ruling based upon ijtihad, he doesn't love the sunnah, he's a person of desires and so forth and so on, then that ruling, if you are a just individual, has to be applied to Ibn Hazm. Ibn Hazm was of the opinion that music was halal, and he explained the way all of these ayat and the way that I explained it, that the ayat are not definitive, and it was the ijtihad of those people who said that these ayat are talking about music, and he said that the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari was not authentic. So if you put the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari on the side, there are other hadith that we mentioned. So the hadith are standing in front of him and other than him, and before you can push them away, you have to deal with them, or if you can't deal with them by saying they're abrogated or they're weak, then they're staring you in the face, you have to deal with the ruling. I just want to reiterate, Khwani, concerning this position of Al-Imam Ibn Hazm. Ibn Hazm's position is a faulty position, but there's not a single human being other than the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, except that he says things that are correct and incorrect. And you, when you look at it, you say, how did he not know that? Abdullah ibn Umar, the companion, who was known for his tenacity in holding on to the sunnah, he said that the salat of a duha is an innovation. When they asked him about salat of a duha before dhuhr, he said it's a muhdath in the deen. Don't do it. It's an innovation. How can Ibn Umar say such a thing? Because he's a human being. Ibn Abbaas said things that you would say, how can he think and how can he believe? At that time that mut'a marriage was permissible. In Sahih al-Bukhari, Abdullah ibn Abbaas was of the opinion at one time mut'a marriage was halal, permissible. The point is, there is no human being except that he gets it right and he gets it wrong. And sometimes great scholars, they get issues that you and I may perceive as being small issues, they get them wrong. And that throws out of the window that statement, the sheikh must have known. The sheikh must have known. Who told you that the sheikh knew? They made mistakes in issues that are clear, it appears. So we continue to hold on to the honor and the noble position of those ulama, but we don't take the mistakes that people made. We make excuses for them, but in making those excuses, the bottom line is every human being gets it right and gets it wrong. As a result of that, I want to read to you what Ibn Hazm used to say against the other madhabs, because he was tough with the other madhabs, especially with the Hanafi madhab. Ibn Hazm, if he was living during this time, the Hanafis would be very upset with him, just as they were upset with him back then. And Imam Ibn Hazm used to criticize Al-Imam Abu Hanif and their madhab because the hadith that they relied upon many times were wrong, they were weak. He used to criticize Al-Imam Abu Hanifa in a way that's not acceptable, because he would make qiyas when the hadith was there, and you can't make qiyas when the hadith is there. So he was not fair and he wasn't just with Al-Imam Abu Hanifa. But look what he said, and he used to say to the people who follow the madhabs. He said to this ummah, Ibn Hazm, it is incumbent upon us as Muslims that we do not accept the sayings of any person after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, unless such a person authentically relates it back to the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's from his words in his book Al-Muhalla. So we say his words are used against him, just as our words are used against us. When we make mistakes, our words are used against us. So Al-Imam Ibn Hazm, he got it wrong in this particular issue, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards him because he was a scholar of ijtihad, and we don't think that he took that position because he wanted to follow his desires. He took that position, inshallah, because he was a man who believed that position. Now, there are times when it's permissible to sing, and there are times when it's permissible to listen to some forms of music. So now we want to share with you that issue. There are times when it's permissible to sing, and there are times when it's permissible to listen to some forms of music. One of those times is in jihad. In jihad fi sabilillah. Because the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, along with his companions, they used to sing and say lines of poetry. The way they used to sing was like men, not like the singing of people who are feminine. No, not like that. In a manly way, they would sing in order to build up their courage, making preparation to meet the enemy, reminding themselves of these issues about the chivalry of their forefathers and the quwwah, the power of this deen. And what was collected by Imam al-Bukhari, a Muslim. It's authentic that when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was about to perform one of the jihads, his companions were saying in the same voice, "Lawla anta mahtadayna, wala tasaddaqna, wala sallayna, fanzilna as-sakinata alayna, thabbit al-aqdam, idh laqayna, inna ulai qad baghu alayna, idha aradu fitnatan abayna." The meaning of this statement that they were saying over and over again, Bukhari and Muslim, verily, if it wasn't for you, Allah, we would not have been guided. And we would not have given sadaqah, nor would we have prayed. So therefore, we're asking you at this place to send down upon us sakina and to establish our feet before we meet these people. It's these people who wanted fitna on us. They wanted to make fitna and fight us and take us from our deen. And this fitna that they wanted, we refused it. The Prophet, he himself would say, "Abayna, abayna," we refused it when they came to that part. So he himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, participated in this song that they were singing, in this melody that they were making, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in the land of jihad is permissible. At the battle of the Khandaq, the battle of the ditch, when those companions, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, when they were building that ditch and they were doing that difficult work, and what was collected by Imam al-Bukhari, they said, "Nahnu alladhina bay'u Muhammadan ala al-Islam ma baqayna abada." We are the ones who gave the bay'ah to Muhammad. We gave the bay'ah that will be Muslims. And we're never going to leave this deen. And they kept saying that over and over under the supervision of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's a time when it's permissible. Number two, on the day of the Eid, it's permissible to sing, and it's permissible to use the duff, because the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, he allowed this to be done with some of the slave girls in his presence, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Bakr came in to the house of Aisha, and the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was facing the wall with his back to Aisha and her two friends, and they were singing songs. And when Abu Bakr came in, he said, "Are the flutes of a Shaytaan in the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam?" Because the girls were singing. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam turned down and he told Abu Bakr, "Leave them, Abu Bakr, this is our Eid. Leave them, let them sing. Every people, they have days of celebration, and this is our day of celebration." When Aisha saw that her father didn't like that, she motioned to those two girls to leave, and they left. But there were multiple incidents, not just one. So here, if it was impermissible for them to do this singing on the day of the Eid, the Prophet wouldn't have allowed it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The third time is permissible to sing, and the duff. It's for the nikah, when people get married. And it's permissible for the women, not for the men. He told the people, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a number of hadith, فَصْلٌ مَا بَيْنَ الْحَرَامِ وَالْحَلَالِ الدَّفْ وَالصَّوْتِ. The thing that makes a distinction between the marriage that is halal, the marriage of Islam, and the marriage that's not halal, the one that's secret, and therefore zina, secret, is that when the people hit the duff, the little tambourine, and the voice where the people are singing. The person will get married, and the Nabi will say, Ya Aisha, did you send something to the Ansar so that they can sing? You, another girl, go over there and sing for them. For verily, the Ansar, they love this singing. He said that to the lady, Aisha, radiyallahu anha. As for the men, there's not something that's permissible like this, playing the duff. That instrument is the one instrument that's allowed in the deen, the duff. The Prophet allowed it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It looks like the tambourine, that thing with the bells on it, but it's without the bells. That thing that they use, women can use that. Women, the little girls, on the day of the Eid, on the day of a person's nikah. Number 4, ikhwani, it's permissible to hit the duff, and it's permissible to sing when a guest comes to you who is honored. Your mother, your father, the husband comes back from a long trip, your wife comes for the first time, they bring you to the house, so the women from your wife's family are playing the duff amongst themselves because you came. The sheikh came to your house, it's permissible to play the duff for the little girl. It's permissible to sing. The dalil for that is it happened with the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He came back from one of the wars. A lady said, Ya Rasulullah, I took an oath with Allah that if Allah brought you back safely, that I would hit the duff and sing in your presence. Should I do my oath? Should I complete my vow? The Prophet told that lady sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Naam, ofi bin nadri. Go ahead, complete your vow. So the lady started hitting the duff and she started singing. Abu Bakr came in. She continued to hit the duff and she continued to sing. After Abu Bakr came, Ali ibn Abi Talib came. Usually it's Abu Bakr came and then Umar came. Abu Bakr left and then Umar left. I believe and Abu Bakr believes and Umar believes. Usually it's like that. But in this hadith, Abu Bakr came and then Ali. She continued to play the duff. Then Uthman ibn Affan came. She continued to play the duff. And then Umar radiyallahu anhu came. When Umar came in, she stopped playing the duff, she stopped singing, and she put the duff under herself and started sitting on it to hide it. The Prophet started smiling sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he told the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Inna Shaytaan la yakhafu minka ya Umar. The Shaytaan is afraid of you, Umar. Some people use that to show music is haram. But it's not haram what the girl was doing, what the lady was doing, radiyallahu anha, because the Prophet allowed her to do an oath, and you're not allowed to do an oath in what's haram. You can't take an oath and say, Wallahi, I'm going to cut my mother off. Wallahi, I'm not going to pray Salatul Jummah anymore. You can't take an oath like that. La nadhra fi ma'asiyatillah, wala fi ma la yamliku al-insan. You cannot make an oath in disobeying Allah, nor can you make an oath about what you don't own. I take an oath that if I do not give this man's car in sadaqah, then I'm going to fast for 2 months. You can't make an oath in what you don't own. So the point here, ikhwani, is that this particular lady in front of the Prophet in his presence, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he came back to Medina, he came back making the qudum, and the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wasallam allowed the lady to do the oath. Now there's ikhtilaf between the ulama of Islam. What about the other issues when we're celebrating, like the aqiqah? There's no dalil saying that these happen with the aqiqah. What if your son or your daughter, they graduated or they passed the exam? There's a joyous occasion and we want to celebrate. Is it permissible at that time for the women to hit the duff and for the people to sing and to dance, there's ikhtilaf. Some said, no, you can only do it at the times and in the way that the sunnah showed us. Jihad, the person comes at the nikah for the Eid. He didn't do that for the aqiqah. If that was from the deen, he would have done it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some of the ulama are more easier, and their ijtihad, they said it's permissible. On the day of the aqiqah of your child, and the people gather to partake in the festivities, then it's permissible. That's an issue of ikhtilaf, an issue of ijtihad on the part of the ulama. And Allah is a'la, and He is a'lam. There are, lastly, ikhwani, some examples where the companions, radiyallahu anhum, it is perceived that they themselves would listen to music and so forth and so on. These issues are not authentic, or they're taken out of context. It was before their religion, before they became Muslims, or other than that. Or they did it and the Prophet ﷺ informed them that it was something that was impermissible. So in this issue, the impermissibility of music is established based upon the dalil from the kitab and from the sunnah. As we just mentioned, the people will take the other side. They have absolutely no dalil that are clear, that are authentic, and the ones that are authentic, they're misunderstood. It's permissible to listen to music because the lady was playing the duff in front of the Nabi, so you can listen to music. That dalil is authentic. That dalil is authentic. But you never get the lady playing other than the duff. Number one, never get the lady playing other than the duff. Number two, you never get anyone other than the woman doing it. The men are not doing it. And then we have those adillah telling us about the other instruments. So yes, the little girl played the duff, the lady played the duff, they were singing here, they were singing there for the jihad and so forth and so on, but it was not accompanied by music. So the ones who use the dalil that are authentic, they are being used out of context. And Allah is a'la and a'lam, and this is what we wanted to present to you, brothers and sisters. We have to make jihad and the issue of music as the cause and the fitna and the evil of the music. It is, again, as that first ayat said, where Allah Ta'ala ordered Shaytaan to get the people and seduce them with his voice. Is one of the most effective weapons that Shaytaan uses against Bani Adam. هذا وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا الأمين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.
غرباء غرباء